One of the big things that immigrants faced when they were coming here that they didn't quite understand until they got here was something called culture shock, okay? Culture shock basically is whenever you run into somebody who is so different than you are, so different than your culture, that you have this disgusted feeling, okay? You can't really quite understand why these people think the way they do. So, one of the big targets were the Asians, and another were the Irish. These are the two biggest targets of culture shock. Nativists did not like these two cultures because they were so different. We have a political cartoon right here. So it says, the great fear of the period, that Uncle Sam will be swallowed by foreigners. Definitely a nativist cartoon. Definitely racist if you look at it, okay? So we have the Asian guy right here. He's got his rice paddy hat. He has squinted eyes, his ponytail there, okay? And on this side, the guy that looks like a leprechaun is an Irish guy, okay? Back then, they basically said that Irish are a bunch of drunks that were stupid, and they liked to fight a lot, and they were apes, okay? They were not civilized people. So basically, if you look at it, they are actually swallowing, both of them, swallowing Uncle Sam, which is, if you remember from earlier chapter videos, that Uncle Sam represents not America, but Uncle Sam represents the United States government specifically, okay? So the idea that the nativist cartoonist here wanted to let us in on is that if we keep letting these immigrants in, eventually they will be the government, okay? We have another political cartoon right here. We have Lady Liberty, and she is stirring the pot of citizenship, this melting pot, right? Now, the idea, according to the melting pot, is that all the cultures of America are going to blend together to create one super American culture where we all have the same things in common. But again, you see that not everybody is conforming. Not everybody is the same here. You see an Irish guy right here. He looks like an ape. He's got the big gaping lips and all that. He's got an Irish flag, and he has a knife that's bloody. So the idea behind this one is that we're going to try the melting pot thing, but there's always going to be these Irish that jump into the pot and make a lot of trouble, and we saw them as kind of like less than human and terrorists, okay, at the same time. So anyway. All right, before the Civil War, most immigrants came from Northern and Western Europe. That's going to be Spain, that's going to be France, Germany, Britain. Those are the main countries that they came from. But after that, they started coming from Southern and Eastern Europe, like Italy, and Ireland comes in, even though it's not in that group, but a lot of Slavic countries, the Russian Slavic countries. So the pre-Civil War potato famine forced thousands of immigrants to flee from Ireland. All right, so multiple choice question 1, impact of the Irish potato famine. All right, what you need to do is remember pushes and pulls. You remember this, right? Pushes are things that make you want to leave a country. Pulls are things that attract you to a country. So what is a potato famine? Is it a push or a pull? It's up to you, okay? You need to know that. So, all right, older immigrants developed strong prejudice against newer ones, okay? And became nativists. So as your family spent more time here, you are assimilated, you are Americanized, you're part of that melting pot. And when a new group of people shows up that's radically different from you, you experience culture shock. And the nativists would try to push these new immigrants down. Opposing immigration, nativists tried to lower the political or legal status of groups considered alien to the natural culture. So they tried to make it harder for these new new immigrants to become American citizens. They were literally changing laws and things like that, making it where you had to wait longer. The test had to be harder. Maybe you had to own property, all these kind of things. These were ideas that nativists were pushing to make sure these new immigrants could not take over the political system. Americans did not like cultures, the language, food, religions. We were very anti-Catholic at the time. So Protestants would have been the main part of America at that time, that's your Baptist, your Methodist, your Pentecostals, all those. Okay, those are Protestants. So anyway, so because we didn't like these new things coming in, we tried to force them out. We tried to force them to have less than American rights. Okay, all right. Immigrants took jobs for less money to feed their families. Okay, the average boss wanted somebody who had been Americanized, someone who knew the language. It's easier to communicate. There's less culture shock. There's less radical ideas. Okay, American ideas are what they were looking for. So whenever these immigrants came in, though, in order to get a job, just like the Chinese, okay, which we're still talking about them too, they expected to work for less money. And because of that, the bosses put up with them, and they would hire 4 Chinese guys to work on the railroad while it would have cost the same to hire 1 white guy. So the nativists, even though some of them were taking advantage of this by getting cheap labor, nativists were always very angry because these new immigrants are stealing their jobs and driving wages down. Now all of a sudden, if you want a job on the railroad, well, a white guy or a black guy has to work for the same wage as a Chinese guy. So it's forcing, because one group of people would work cheaper, it's forcing everybody to work cheaper, which is good for robber barons, but not so great for the average nativist American.